Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Nicole Lamont. I'm the Vice President of Philanthropy for Trillium Health Partners Foundation. I was just thrilled looking over the RSVP list and seeing so many familiar names. I've had the privilege of being with the foundation for almost 2 decades and have gotten to meet many of you in person, and I'm just thrilled to serve for our hospital. This has been a busy time, as you can imagine, with our hospital being at the forefront of COVID. I'm so proud to say that we've, at this point, been able to administer over 500,000 vaccines to our community. And this has been at a time that our community has needed us most. And I want to thank many of you who are on the call who have been generous over your lifetime in supporting the various needs of our hospital from an infrastructure perspective and capital, equipment, and our ongoing needs in terms of innovative programming. I want to thank you so much for being such dedicated supporters and for joining us here today to learn about how you can continue to give. At this moment in time, not only are we at the forefront of the COVID pandemic and everything that we are doing to support as a healthcare facility, but we're also managing our massive infrastructure of programming across 12 regional programs. Just to give you an example, last year, we cared for 55,000 people in our cancer program. Today, and many of you may not realize this, today we serve 2.2 million people from all the way from West Toronto all the way into Oakville, and are Ontario's busiest hospital with 1.7 million patient visits per year. We are just so grateful to have the support of so many of you and your friends and family and colleagues to our hospital. I'm really thrilled that you've joined us here today and joining Sherry Lynn Ketchen, such a good friend to our foundation. And I will tell you, she and many generations of her family have been involved with our hospital foundation for many, many years. And I just want to tell you a few more things about Sherry Lynn before I hand it over to her. But I want to let you know that Sherry Lynn as well is part of our planned giving community and is someone who very early stepped up and said, I want to participate and I want to make a planned gift, and I want to leave Trillium Health Partners in my estate. And I'll tell you, she's one of the thousands of people who have done the same and who have identified healthcare as a key priority for her family and for her community and all of her friends. And I'm thrilled to every time I get the opportunity to sit down with Sherry Lynn, I learn so much about estate planning and the different ways and the different levers that we have as donors to ensure that we're making a very personal and a very impactful gift to our hospital, but also looking at ways that it can be tax advantageous and to really be able to tick a couple of boxes in terms of plannings for one's own legacy. And I want to tell you about a story about a family, Bob and Judy, who were looking at their future and looking at the ways that they would care for their family and their grandchildren, but had the opportunity, and in my mind, we're just very forward thinking, especially at the time that they did this a number of years ago, but they sat down with their children and they planned out the estate, and they took the opportunity to really incorporate their children and their grandchildren in the impact and the legacy that they wish to have in healthcare and within their own philanthropy and their own giving. And as they were telling me this story, they just lit up with pride and with enthusiasm about the plans that they had made, the fact that they'd been able to communicate this to their family, and the joy that their family had in seeing their delight and their enthusiasm and the legacy that they were creating moving forward. So I just want to sort of keep that in the back of your mind as you hear from Sherry Lynn. But I want to tell you that we're so lucky to have her here on this call. Sherry Lynn brings 20 years of experience in the financial services industry, specifically with RBC Dominion Securities. And I think would probably be one of the only people who could say you were the 4th generation of your family to work in investment business. And so these days, Sherry Lynn is a portfolio manager and investment advisor, and certainly has a massive amount of expertise in wealth preservation, and also investment management. And really has a focus similar to ours in the foundation of creating long-term relationships with her clients and really creating strategies that achieve all of her clients' objectives. Sherilyn is fully licensed in securities, options, and insurance. And, I'll just share a personal story too. Sherilyn had the opportunity to be an executor for both of her parents' wills over the past year. And so in addition to the hat she wears as a financial services advisor and expert, also wore the hat of being the daughter and executing the desires of her parents and their wills. So brings a really personal perspective to this as well. So with that, I am thrilled to hand the virtual microphone over to Sherilyn. Welcome.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. And it's wonderful to be back here hosting a webinar with you again as a follow-on to our last barn burner of a webinar, which was last year. And I just, off the top, I would like to thank you and everybody at Trillium Health Partners Foundation, because you are truly making a difference in terms of supporting the hospital and its ability to deliver world quality care to those of us in the community that are lucky enough or unlucky enough, as the case may be, to need it. And I have a personal anecdote about that, because my husband on Father's Day this year decided to gift himself. Well, he tripped over his own feet and then broke conveniently his right arm. So we got to, on Father's Day, come to the Mississauga site, to the emergency room. That was a Sunday. Monday, we got up to the fracture clinic up at Credit Valley. Following Friday, we came back to the Mississauga site for surgery on the right arm. And then we had follow-up visits at Credit Valley Fracture Clinic, where I think we've become good friends with several of the staff. They were wonderful. They provided excellent care. They were compassionate, unlike the treatment he got at home, where we all laughed at him. But so I have seen firsthand, again, how wonderful and the care is that we receive. And I know that the foundation, I've seen the effect that donor gifts and the legacy that donors have, and how they truly make an impact on healthcare. So I'm really glad to be here with you today to talk about our Will Planning 101.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm glad that we were able to be there for your husband. I hope things have healed.
Well, I think if you talk to him, no, but I think the truth is, yes, he's back to 100% avoiding work around the home. So yeah, everything's good.
Perfect, thanks. Well, I want to thank everyone who has sent in questions ahead of time. So we'll start to go through those questions and then leave some time at the end as well if people have additional questions. But just wanted to also indicate that if you want to send questions in throughout, the email address is foundation@thp.ca. So that's foundation, FOUNDATION at THP for trilliumhealthpartners.ca. So with that, let's kick it off and we'll get right into the questions. So the first question is, why is it important to create a will?
That's a great question to start with. It's important to create a will for a few different reasons. The first and foremost, obviously, I don't think it's going to come as any surprise to anyone, is that you want to take care of your loved ones. You may want to support causes that are important to you throughout your lifetime. And it's a great opportunity through your will to think about how you want to leave your legacy. If you die and you don't have a will, then you have died intestate. And basically what that means is your assets are going to be distributed according to the various provincial law and may end up going to beneficiaries in an amount or in a format that is not the best or contrary to your wishes. So we often say when we're talking about this, if you don't have a will, you're basically designating the CRA as your number one beneficiary. through probate fees, through estate taxes. Whereas when you have a will, there are ways that you can structure things that you can work to mitigate the effects of those fees and taxes. So it's very important that you do have a will.
So, essentially you're saying if you haven't made a plan, somebody else is going to make that plan for you.
The plan is made for you, and you may have certain expectations of how you want to structure things and who gets what, but that kind of all goes out the window if you don't have a legal document that sets that out for you. So yeah, get a will written. Do you have a will, Nicole?
I do, yes, thank you. But I think I'm going to pick up a few things here through this. I might need to revise it.
Okay.
And now, when would you say, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, when would you say is the right time to start thinking about a will? And then maybe I might add on to that, when should you revisit it?
Right. That's another great question. So really, I mean, there's no bad time to start thinking about your will or to have one written. Really, practically, you want to have some appreciable assets that you are leaving behind. So whether that's you own a home, or you own investment portfolios, or any kind of asset, digital assets, those kinds of things, that's when you want to start the will planning process and writing a will. There can also be things that happen in your life, like you have a marriage, or perhaps a marriage breakdown, or you have a child, or perhaps new grandchildren. Any of those kind of life events are times when you're going to want to make sure you have a will, or if you do have a will, you're going to want to review it. Once you've written your will, it doesn't mean it's set in stone. You can make changes to it. If new people come along, or you decide, oh, I'd like to leave something to charity, then it's very easy to add that into an existing will. But generally, the rule of thumb is that approximately every 5 years, you want to revisit what you have, your estate planning as it stands. Make sure that it still appropriately reflects your wishes and your circumstances. One of the things that I do notice, and I've seen it in my own practice, is as my clients are getting older, and they have a little more financial stability. And I should say, actually, it's not just my older clients. I mean, a younger cohort, actually, I've seen that too, is the increasing importance of philanthropy and the desire to leave something behind, altruistically, because you're helping out a cause or a charity that you support, but also there's some good tax benefits to doing that too. So we have seen a great increase in the addition of charitable giving through the will.
Now, is adding a charity to your will, is that something that requires an entire rewrite of the will, or is that something that could be added as a codicil?
You can add it as a codicil. Generally, what it will do is a codicil is just basically modifying what is already in place. If you have an awful lot of changes that you want to make, then sometimes you will have to kind of start from scratch and rewrite a will. But in most cases, it's just a simple addition.
Terrific. And when you're thinking about your will and thinking about either rewriting or adding a codicil, what's your advice on who you should consult during that process?
Well, just to sort of loop it back into the webinar that we did last year, in not necessarily consultation, but a conversation, the first one that you want to have is with your loved ones. And basically what you don't have to get into the grim details of what you're planning, but oftentimes it's an act of kindness to discuss what your intentions are with your loved ones. It helps to, if you don't want to have any hurt feelings afterwards. In some cases, if it could be a good surprise as well, but maybe some people aren't sort of equipped at that point to know how to handle a larger bequest. So as I say, an act of kindness to kind of discuss it a little bit with your loved ones. Next thing is you're going to want to speak to a lawyer. Now, you can handwrite a will. I mean, often called the holographic wills, and in many jurisdictions, those are legal. But in my job, I look at it from a risk management point of view. And a holographic will is a little more open to being challenged. And that is a risk that you take on when you don't have a professional that helps you craft and think about the kind of the ins and outs and the way you're supposed to structure things, or just make it a little more bulletproof. So, these are assets that you have probably worked your life for. You have ways that you have certain amounts you want to leave to people or to causes that you believe in. I know that some can look at, well, there's fees associated, there's costs associated with going to see a lawyer. But if you properly structure things, there are ways that, of course, you can, we've talked about with mitigating those final costs. And in the long run, it's going to save you an awful lot more money if you do it right the first time. So you consult a lawyer. An accountant is another great professional to speak with specific ways of structuring and which assets should go to whom. And then also people like me, if you work with an investment advisor, an awful lot of my clients, we go through that process of discussing what is in your estate plan, because we can also hold assets in certain ways that will make sense when it comes time to pass on to beneficiaries. So, a couple of examples, if you say have a family cottage that you want to keep in the family, as a secondary property, it is subject to capital gains tax. It is deemed to have been sold when you pass on. So one of the things that you can do is, if you have some life insurance, you purchase a life insurance policy that has a death benefit that is somewhat equal to the anticipated tax hit on that family cottage. The beneficiaries use that money to pay the tax bill. In that case, you can keep the property. Another example, I have a client who was recently widowed. She doesn't have any other family, so she discussed that she wanted to leave assets to various charities and causes that were important to her. So we set up charitable giving accounts that she funds throughout her lifetime, and that will continue to disperse assets to those charities even after she is gone. So she's in effect created a legacy for herself. And the last thing that we discussed with her as well, because she didn't have family, in terms of choosing her executor, who is the person that's going to carry out her wishes, she, in her case, went with a corporate executor. She didn't have family. Her friends she could use, but they're all the same age as she is. So, she's in her 80s. Does she want to be having another, an 80-year-old looking after, trying to wrap up her estate? Not really. So in that case, again, that's another professional that you bring in and you kind of discuss the planning around it.
That makes a lot of sense. And so I guess essentially what you're saying is you've worked your life to create this pool of assets. And so to really put the thought and consult the right professionals to ensure that it's that your wishes will be carried out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. There was a question here just in the chat. The question is there a standard format for a will that one can download and complete in advance of going to see a lawyer or a financial advisor?
That's a very good question. And it can help to reduce the fees associated because of, as you know, lawyers charge by the hour. So if you can have some information handy beforehand, that can certainly speed up the process. I do not know of a specific site. It's something that I can look into and get back to you on. I think, the more very simple estates don't take it's not an arduous process to get a will written. A lot of things, like with my mother, for example, she had an investment account. She has her property, and she left things in equal shares to her family. So very simple. There were no sort of private corporations. There were no operating companies or offshore things or anything like that. So a very simple estate. The more complex you get, though, you're going to really want to have a more in-depth conversation with the professionals that I mentioned before, because because again, there are ways to structure that. And that would be in a case where you're probably not going to find something online that's going to give you an awful lot of help beforehand. But I've made a note of that, and I'll take a look and see, and I can maybe pass that on to you, Nicole, and you can
Thank
pass
you.
along. Okay.
And the person who asked that question, if you just want to email us at foundation@thp.ca, we'll pass that information along to you. And you know what, I think some of the elements of the genesis of that question might come here in the next thing I'm going to ask you. And that's, what are the top 3 things that you should think about and consider when you're starting to write your will?
Well, I mean, there again, it's kind of like we talked about in the beginning. Number 1 is, who are your beneficiaries? Who do you want to leave assets to? And this is, of course, very simple. When we're going for top 3 lists, we're going to keep it simple. So number 1, to whom do you want to leave to whom do you want to make bequests? Number 2, who are you trusting with the responsibility of carrying out those wishes? And number 3, are there ways that you can, as I said, whether it's in terms of which assets go to which beneficiary, or how can we structure things so that we can mitigate our probate and our estate taxes? Those taxes are the things that are the biggest, sort of take the biggest bite out of what is left behind for your beneficiaries. So the most that you can do to structure them in a tax efficient manner, the more you're going to be able to leave behind for those people, those charities, those causes that are important to you.
Well, and the next question that I have here, you know what, I feel like from hanging out with you, I can answer this. I can do the heavy lift on this. So the question is, why is it important to bring an advisor in for this sort of thing? And just from hearing your advice, both on this call and some of the conversations you and I have had one-on-one, I suppose it's really just important to ensure that you're having a professional put things in order and do so in a way that will be fully executed as per your own wishes. And just thinking about some of the things that we've been involved here in the foundation, and just ensuring that the consistency of donor intent and wishes, and the consistency of intent for a mother, or a father for their children or grandchildren. But that's sort of my plug there, and on behalf of the great work that you and your industry do. But I'll hand the question over to you to answer.
Okay. So you'll answer the question and then you'll have me answer the answer. Okay. So you did very well.
Did I do okay? Okay, great.
Really what it comes down to is, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Like when you can have a general idea of how you want things to look after you're gone, but in terms of the intricacies of planning that so that it does get carried out properly, you really do need to speak to people that they do this for a living. Like there's practically, I'm sure if you talk to a lawyer, they're going to come back and say, oh, you should have seen what this guy said. But there's practically nothing that you're going to bring to them that they haven't seen before, or they don't have an answer as to what is the best way to structure that properly. So some of the things that you want to think about: do you want to leave cash, or do you want to leave asset? Like if you have an investment portfolio, for instance, as I mentioned before, who gets what? Like for instance, you have registered accounts, RSPs or RIFs. You would most likely, the most tax efficient manner is you can designate a spouse as your beneficiary directly on that account. It rolls over on a tax deferred basis to the surviving spouse. So, registered assets, for example, you're going to want to name a beneficiary. Don't name estate, because then it gets lumped in with the estate for probate and estate tax purposes and everything. Name a direct beneficiary on that. And of course, your favorite, Nicole, charity. you can name a charity as a beneficiary of, again, cash or assets. Most charities are able to accept donations of securities in kind. That is, the securities are directly donated to the charity. It results in a great tax deduction for the estate. And as we've mentioned more than a few times during this, the more you can cut those taxes to your estate, the more that's going to be left behind for the people and charities that you want to. So, I mean, that's a kind of a high level overview. There are lots of considerations depending, and there are, a number of different ways that, and a number of different desires that people have. And the best way is just to plunk those down in front of the guy or lady who does that for a living, and work it out that way.
Fantastic, thank you. And this is more of a simple question, but where would somebody go to have a will drafted?
Well, again, most lawyers, especially if it's just a simple estate, are able to draw up a will. If you have a little bit more of a complex situation, in some cases, if there are, say, second families, maybe there's some issues with maybe dependents or people that you want to set up trusts or things like that for, you want to talk to an estate lawyer. And as to where to find those, I would always start if you have some friends that have drawn up their will. Hopefully you have, and or professionals like me. I mean, I will refer my clients to accountants and lawyers and things that I've worked with in the past, so I know how they conduct their business, and so we kind of all refer to each other. So I would say that it's something that you want to kind of. Nobody is excited to get up in the morning and contemplate, today I get to write my will. Like, okay. And it's very easy to put it to the bottom of the to-do list. But I think, and especially, and I've heard it more over the past year and a half that we've been through, and where we've lost so many people, it's not something that you want to leave too late. Just once you get it done, it's set, you've got the peace of mind. Again, you review it every so often, but at least it's there. I don't have to worry about this anymore.
Do you know what? When I did mine, I remember thinking, it was, kind of like ticking that box, but it was also to me just really gratifying and a weight off that I knew that I had articulated my wishes, and that was all locked in. It was quite gratifying, and a bit of a sense of relief too, just knowing that was all set.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and it does involve, like, not gonna lie, it does take some work at the beginning. It's going to take a bit of a commitment of time to get it done, but like you've said, once it's done, I have children. You want to know, okay, if something happens to me and I don't live forever, as I am planning, that they will be looked after, and that's important. So yeah, just rip off that Band-Aid and go talk about your death.
Well, and, the other thing that many of our donors who have included us in their estate plans have said as well is that, including us as a charity in their will has created an opportunity for them to give at a level and give an amount that they never thought possible within life. And, to even have those conversations with the foundation and with some of our clinical leaders to understand the impact that what gift was going to have in the future, I know has been, quite celebratory for people as well.
It kind of takes a bit of the, not the sting out of it, but knowing that you are doing something that is going to make a difference for those that come after you. And it does feel good to think that, of course you want to look after your family and your loved ones, but if you're able to include the charity in your estate plans, it just, there endorphins get released when you give. There are scientific studies about that. It kind of makes the whole thought of it like, okay, I was here, I counted for something, and I'm going to make sure that others are looked after even when I'm gone.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And now, and thank you for agreeing to be a bit personal here as well, with respect to your own story and the experience that you had as being an executor for both of your parents' estate plans. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and what were the aha moments or learnings for you throughout that process?
Oh,
Thank you.
the aha moments. Okay, well, yes. Both of my parents had named me as an executor in their wills. And right off the top, I thought this is a tremendous honor. I mean, they trust me to take on that responsibility. They trust in my competency and my honesty, all that sort of thing. It was,
Yeah.
you always want to please your parents, I guess, and knowing that they had that kind of confidence in me was it meant an awful lot to me. But it wore off very quickly because I saw the amount of work that it took. Now, unfortunately, my parents passed away within 6 weeks of each other. So there was I have a list of 50 to 60, and that's not exaggerating. There are 50 to 60 different tasks that as an executor you're taking on. Some of them are large. They're paying the probate fees, or they're paying the estate taxes, or they're distributing the gifts to the beneficiaries. And some of them are small. They're canceling driver's licenses or passports, or utilities, trying to pay those bills and turn off the cable. I don't know if you've ever had to talk to Rogers Cable for an extended period of time as an executor, but it's not a fun job. And you're doing all these things at the same time as you're grieving. I mean, I lost my mom first. And as I'm in the midst of dealing with her estate, and, I've got 2 kids and I've got a job and my clients, and all that doesn't go away just because I've got to handle this responsibility. And then right after that, my father died. And then there was a second estate that we had to deal with. Now, in my mom's case, I was a co-executor. So luckily that person is someone that I get along with very well. We don't argue about things. But I've seen in my own practice, in some cases that I have seen, where beneficiaries don't get along, and they have to agree on how they're wrapping up an estate, and any kind of argument back and forth, or maybe one's doing more of the work and the other one's sort of on the sidelines, sort of lobbing those little grenades about how things should be done, leads to a delay in an estate. So again, that kind of underscores, think about who you are naming as your executor. By the time my father passed away, I couldn't do it. I thought, I can't be dealing with 2 estates at once. It's too big a job. In my own case, for my dad's estate, I hired a corporate executor as my agent. So I'm still involved in it. I'm kind of directing, we got to do this, we got to do that. But they're kind of doing the nitty gritty. They're carrying out the dirty work for me. So it is a burden, but it's less of a burden. And I don't know any other way I could have done it. And I will say, for my own estate, that experience has told me I don't want to put that burden on my own family. So in my estate plans, I have named a corporate executor to carry it out, because you've also got liability attached to it. Let's not forget that. So if some of the beneficiaries decide to challenge, or there's a fight or something, the executor gets caught up in the middle of it. And it's really a thankless job. It was, as I said, I was very honored that they both chose me. And then I kind of wanted to bring them back so I could tell them, stop it, don't do this.
That's helpful.
Change it right now.
That's helpful perspective, and especially with somebody with the kind of wherewithal that you have in this field.
Well, yeah, and that's it. Like, I'm used to kind of dealing with this. I mean, it's not my main job, but certainly it's a conversation that I have with my clients. And I don't think anything really prepares you for the amount of work until you have to do it yourself. And then you see, and then you just want to slink off into a corner somewhere, into a quiet corner, and just be left alone for a little bit. Maybe have a nap.
That's really helpful.
That's right.
And thank you for sharing your personal story as well. The next question, a little bit more tactical. What's the best way to handle one's stock portfolio?
Well, okay. The stock portfolio, if it's a non-registered portfolio, so not an RSP or a RIF or a TFSA, it is handled under the disbursements of the will. So if it's not held jointly, then what happens is when you die, it is deemed to have been sold at the market value as of the date that you pass away. And any capital gains that may have accrued are taxable to the estate. So, a couple of things that you can do in that instance, you can donate securities in kind, like as we've discussed throughout this webinar, where you will get a tax deduction receipt for the market value of those securities. And if there are large capital gains attached to that, you don't pay them. That's one way to kind of reduce taxes. Another thing you can do, you can purchase an insurance policy, similar to what we talked about with the cottage situation. In my case, with my clients, we'll do an analysis. Okay, this is the expected value of your estate at the time of your passing. This is what we expect the tax situation will look like. We can go ahead and we can purchase insurance with that kind of equal death benefit, because the death benefit from an insurance policy passes outside of probate. It passes outside of the estate. So it's given tax-free to the named beneficiary. Oftentimes they will use that to pay down a tax bill so that the actual asset itself is not encroached upon to pay those taxes. You can set up donor advised funds, charitable giving accounts, and affect kind of your own foundation. You're making in-kind donations of those securities with large capital gains. Again, the resultant donation tax credit to offset during your lifetime. That's
okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is, are there stipulations to including family in the United States in one's will?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure this is a bigger question than we have time for, but just the Cole's notes.
Yeah. And so yes, there are. The IRS and the CRA have an information sharing arrangement. So U.S. residents, and whether that's a resident or a green card holder, and you can get kind of into the weeds on those definitions, but they often have to pay tax on their global wealth. So when you're a Canadian leaving assets to a US citizen, certain ones they can't, there are very negative tax implications too, such as mutual funds, private corporations, things like that. Upshot of the story is, there are ways you can set up trusts, but a cross-border tax advisor is the person that you really do need to consult on that, because the rules are complex. They change all the time. And, if you are going to include US beneficiaries and you don't want the negative tax implications, that cross-border advisor can help you set that up. The other thing I would say attach that to is back to the executor thing. Thank goodness in my case, I haven't had any international beneficiaries, because that's a nightmare. So in that case too, that's another reason why you may want to look at appointing a corporate executor to handle it.
That's helpful. I'm going to bring it back here to Canada. The question is, how would one minimize tax owing on an RRSP or an RAF?
Okay, so as we discussed earlier, if you have registered accounts, RSPs, RIFs, and you have a spouse, name the spouse as the beneficiary. It's going to roll over on a tax deferred basis to the spouse. The other thing that you can do, and in the case if you are, say, the surviving spouse and you don't have another spouse to leave it to, and you don't have a dependent or a family member with a disability, that's another beneficiary you can make on registered assets. You can name a charity as a beneficiary of your, stop smiling. You can name a charity as a beneficiary of your registered assets, because again, as we've said, that results in a large tax deduction for the estate. In that case where you don't have, where you are the last surviving spouse in that case. But generally, if you do have registered assets, please do make sure that you name a beneficiary on those accounts. Don't put estate, name somebody, or a charity, but name somebody.
Perfect. Great advice. And I'm going to try to sneak one more question in.
Okay.
We promise to end on time. The last question here is, what's the best way to set up a trust for someone's grandchildren?
Okay, so I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but I want you to consult with your lawyer on that. I can tell you in my own instance, my parents did set up trusts for their grandchildren. They did it through their will. They're called testamentary trusts, and testamentary trusts do have rules attached to them in regards to when can you encroach upon capital, what about income distributions to the beneficiaries, when do the funds in those trusts actually go to the beneficiaries. So, in my instance, my father left money to the grandkids that they can access at the age of 21. My mother apparently has a jaundiced view of her grandchildren and said they can't touch it till they're 35. So I guess they'll be living with me for quite some time. Anyway, there are also benefits to the tax benefits to the way they're structured and in the sort of the front end of the creation of those things. So that's something, again, that you talk to your lawyer or your accountant and they can work together to put that. That's probably a very effective way if you do want to set up trusts for your grandchildren.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And we always promise that we're going to end on time. Sherry Lynn, I can't thank you enough for joining us. This terrific advice and just bringing a real personal lens to a topic that can be difficult to discuss, but so important to be thinking about. So thank you so much for your. All of you on the line, thank you so much for taking time out to join us to learn a little bit more about planning your estate and also to be considering the ways that you can include Trillium Health Partners Foundation in your estate plans. And thank you for everything that you do for our hospital family. You're going to be getting a survey tomorrow from Lindsay Murray, who will send you a little bit of additional information. And if there are any other questions you have, or if you'd like us to put you in touch with Sherry Lynn Ketchum, we'd be thrilled to do that too. Thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody.